In a landmark decision, the United States Supreme Court has struck down the sweeping tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, dismantling the core of his administration's trade policy. This ruling reasserts the separation of powers and marks a turning point for global trade, impacting everything from consumer prices to international alliances. The court declared that the president cannot use emergency powers to enact broad tariffs without explicit congressional approval, setting a precedent for future administrations. Businesses now face the prospect of massive refunds and renewed uncertainty, while the Trump administration must rapidly recalibrate its trade strategy. As the world watches, the United States stands at a crossroads, forced to navigate a new and unpredictable chapter in global commerce. To truly understand the Supreme Court's ruling, we first need to examine the tariffs at the heart of the controversy. These tariffs didn't appear out of nowhere. They were the result of a series of bold and unprecedented policy decisions that would reshape America's approach to global trade. Beginning in 2024, President Trump enacted sweeping duties on nearly all major U.S. trading partners. He justified these actions by declaring national emergencies under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, a law originally designed for very different circumstances. The administration argued that these measures were necessary to protect American industries and jobs from what it called unfair foreign competition. The tariffs were broad, covering a vast range of products, from European cars and steel to Chinese electronics and everyday consumer goods. The economic impact was immediate and far-reaching, generating up to $400 billion in annual revenue for the government. However, these new duties also led to higher prices for American businesses and consumers, as the cost of imported goods surged across the country. Critics from across the political spectrum argued that the tariffs disrupted global supply chains, hurt American exporters, and threatened jobs in industries reliant on international trade. Many saw this as a dramatic departure from decades of bipartisan support for free trade, sparking heated debates in the media and on Capitol Hill. Legally, the use of IEEPA in this context was highly controversial. The law was originally intended to address specific threats to national security, not to serve as a tool for broad economic policy. Many legal scholars and lawmakers believed the administration was stretching the law far beyond its intended purpose. By invoking IEEPA to impose tariffs, the administration bypassed Congress's constitutional authority over trade and taxation. This move raised fundamental questions about the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority in economic matters. The resulting legal challenge set the stage for a historic constitutional showdown, one that would ultimately be decided by the nation's highest court, with consequences for the future of American trade policy and the balance of power in government. The legal battle began with small businesses and states challenging the president's authority to impose tariffs under IEEPA. Lower courts sided with the challengers, ruling that only Congress can levy such sweeping tariffs, citing the major questions doctrine. The Trump administration appealed, arguing the president needed broad discretion in emergencies, but the federal circuit upheld the lower court's decision. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, keeping the tariffs in place temporarily and leaving global markets in suspense. The case drew national attention, with legal experts predicting a tough road for the administration. At stake were fundamental questions about the separation of powers and the limits of executive authority. The outcome would shape not just trade policy but the very structure of American government. Today, the Supreme Court sided with states and businesses, striking down the IEEPA-based tariffs. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, emphasized that only Congress can authorize such sweeping economic measures. The court invoked the major questions doctrine, stating that if Congress intended to grant the president this power, it would have done so explicitly. The decision cut across ideological lines, highlighting the constitutional, not partisan, nature of the issue. The ruling reaffirms that while the president has authority in foreign affairs, trade and taxation remain congressional domains. The court's message: transformative trade policy requires open debate and legislative approval, not executive shortcuts. This closes the door on broad IEEPA tariffs and returns trade policy to Capitol Hill. The Supreme Court's decision has immediate economic fallout. The government may owe up to $150 billion in refunds to businesses that paid the now illegal tariffs, a logistical nightmare for the Treasury. Major trade deals negotiated under the threat of tariffs are suddenly in jeopardy. as foreign partners may seek to renegotiate. Industries reliant on imports, like manufacturing and construction, will benefit from lower costs, while protected sectors like steel face renewed competition. The ruling injects volatility into global markets, forcing businesses to rethink supply chains and investment plans. A stronger dollar could make U.S. exports less competitive, adding another layer of complexity. The path forward is uncertain, with both risks and opportunities for American companies. Businesses must adapt quickly to this new landscape. Facing mounting legal challenges and anticipating defeat in the courts, the Trump administration has already begun to pivot, quickly shifting its focus to a new legal strategy in hopes of maintaining its trade agenda. Rather than backing down, officials are doubling down, determined to find alternative pathways to impose tariffs and protect American industries. This time, they're invoking Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a powerful tool that allows the president to impose tariffs on goods considered threats to national security. By framing economic competition as a security risk, the administration is able to justify new trade barriers, even as previous efforts face legal setbacks. Unlike the broad, sweeping tariffs attempted under the IEEPA, Section 232 measures are more targeted and precise, recently hitting key sectors such as pharmaceuticals, semi-trucks, and critical metals. These industries are now at the center of the administration's renewed trade offensive, with companies scrambling to adapt. New investigations have also been launched into robotics, medical devices, and semiconductors. These probes signal that the administration's protectionist intent is not only continuing, but expanding into even more advanced and strategic industries vital to the nation's future. This evolving approach is creating a complex patchwork of trade barriers, targeting specific industries with little advance notice. The uncertainty is leaving businesses and global partners on edge, unsure of which sectors might be targeted next. The definition of national security, under Section 232, remains intentionally broad, giving the executive branch significant discretion to determine which imports pose a risk. This flexibility allows for rapid action, but also raises concerns about overreach and unpredictability. Even the ongoing government shutdown hasn't slowed this process. Key officials continue to work late into the night, underscoring the administration's unwavering commitment to advancing its new tariff front, regardless of political obstacles. The legal and political battles over America's trade policy are far from over. Instead, they're simply shifting to a new arena, one where the stakes are higher, the strategies more complex, and the outcome increasingly uncertain for industries and consumers alike. The real-world impact of these shifting trade policies is stark in sectors like pharmaceuticals and steel. These industries, though very different, are both deeply affected by the push and pull of tariffs, exemptions, and government intervention. The choices made in Washington ripple out to factory floors and pharmacy counters across the country, shaping the daily lives of workers, business owners, and consumers alike. Proposed tariffs on imported medicines threaten to spike drug prices, raising concerns for patients and healthcare providers. However, exemptions were granted to companies like Pfizer in exchange for policy concessions, highlighting the complex negotiations behind the scenes. These deals often determine which companies thrive and which struggle, and can mean the difference between affordable medicine and higher costs at the pharmacy. The Supreme Court's decision invalidates this framework, creating uncertainty for both businesses and policymakers. Yet, the administration is likely to use Section 232 to keep up the pressure, signaling that the debate over trade protections is far from over. Legal battles and policy shifts continue to shape the landscape. In steel, tariffs protected domestic producers, helping some American factories stay open and retain jobs. But these same measures raised costs for manufacturers who rely on steel, and ultimately for consumers buying everything from cars to appliances. The benefits and drawbacks are felt throughout the supply chain. The court's ruling is a relief for steel-using industries, which now face fewer cost pressures, but it's a blow to steelmakers who must now compete with global imports. The decision reshapes the competitive landscape, forcing companies to adapt quickly. The administration's new Section 232 tariffs aim to shield steel and aluminum, continuing the cycle of targeted protectionism. These policies are designed to support key industries, but they also risk sparking retaliation from trading partners and further complicating global supply chains. This highlights the trade policy dilemma. Helping one sector often hurts another. Every decision creates winners and losers, and the challenge is finding a balance that supports growth without causing unintended harm elsewhere in the economy. The balancing act has real consequences for jobs, prices, and the broader economy. As policymakers weigh their options, the stakes remain high for American workers, families, and businesses navigating an ever-changing global marketplace. The Supreme Court's decision ends one chapter but opens another in America's trade saga. Expect a surge in targeted Section 232 tariffs, with industries bracing for sudden policy shifts. Businesses will lobby for refunds and scramble to avoid becoming the next target, navigating a landscape of rolling uncertainty. International partners welcome the end of broad tariffs, but remain wary of new national security measures. The fate of major trade deals with the EU and Japan will signal the new global dynamic. The debate over America's role in the world economy now returns to Congress, where partisan battles loom. Will the U.S. champion open markets or double down on protectionism? One thing is clear: the era of predictable trade policy is over.